The place with the king's warriors.
David, you are a poet, and you are a shepherd. You are not a man of glass.
The first look at House of David Season 3 is here, and honestly, nothing could have prepared me for what I just watched. This trailer doesn't ease you in. It doesn't give you a slow build. It throws you straight into the fire, and from the very first second, you can feel that everything has shifted. The energy is different, the stakes are different, and the story that's been building since Season 1 is finally arriving at the moment we've all been waiting for. David is no longer the boy with the sling. He's no longer the shepherd running from a jealous king. What we're about to see in Season 3 is a man who has been tested, broken, rebuilt, and sharpened by everything life and God have thrown at him. And this trailer makes it crystal clear that Season 3 is going to be the most intense, most emotional, and most spiritually raw chapter of this entire story. So let's break down every single thing this trailer is telling us, because there is a lot to unpack. From the very opening moments of this trailer, you can feel that the world of House of David has fundamentally changed. The atmosphere is heavier, the colors feel darker, the music hits differently, and that's not by accident. The creative team behind this show has always been intentional about how they use visuals and sound to tell the emotional truth of a scene before a single word is even spoken. And in this trailer, they're telling us loud and clear that we are no longer in the early chapters of this story. We are deep into the consequences of everything that came before. If you watched Season 2 closely, you already know that the finale left things in a place that felt almost irreversible. Saul crossed a line at Nob that no king should ever cross. He didn't just make a bad decision. He ordered the destruction of an entire city of priests, people who had dedicated their lives to God, people who were innocent, and he did it simply because one of them had shown kindness to David. That single act said everything about where Saul was mentally and spiritually. It wasn't the move of a king trying to protect his throne. It was the move of a man who had already lost and was too far gone to realize it. And the trailer for Season 3 opens with the weight of that decision still hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. What you immediately notice is how the people around Saul are carrying themselves differently now. There's a distance, a tension, the kind of silence that exists between people who witness something unforgivable and don't quite know how to move forward from it. Abner, who had always been one of Saul's most reliable commanders, looked shaken in the Season 2 finale. And in this trailer, that shift in his posture, that change in his eyes, tells you that what happened at Nob didn't just affect him emotionally. It changed his calculations entirely. A man like Abner doesn't survive as long as he has by being blindly loyal. He survives by reading the room. And the room is telling him something very different now. Then there's Jonathan. And honestly, every time this trailer cuts to Jonathan, it feels like a quiet devastation. Because Jonathan is one of the most tragic figures in this entire biblical story, and the show has done such a beautiful job of honoring that tragedy. He loves his father, he is loyal to his bloodline, but he also knows, with a clarity that probably terrifies him, that David is the future. He's known it for a long time, and the trailer shows him caught in that exact same impossible place, trying to hold two truths at once, the truth of his love for Saul and the truth of what God has made clear about David. Watching Jonathan in this trailer is like watching someone stand at a crossroads knowing that every single road leads to heartbreak. And yet he stands there with this quiet dignity that honestly makes you respect him even more. But here's what the trailer is really setting up in these early moments. It's not just showing you that Saul's world is falling apart. It's showing you the contrast. Because while Saul's camp looks like a place where trust has been replaced by fear and loyalty has been replaced by survival instinct, David's world looks completely different. There's a clarity around David that wasn't there before, a stillness, the kind that comes not from having easy circumstances because his circumstances are still brutal, but from a man who has learned to find peace inside the chaos because he knows who he is and who called him. That contrast between Saul's crumbling world and David's quietly growing one is the emotional spine of this entire trailer. And it sets up Season 3 in the most powerful way possible because it tells you before anything else that this isn't really a story about two men fighting over a throne. It's a story about what happens when a man chooses fear over faith, and another man chooses faith over everything. And the results of those two choices are about to play out in the most devastating and glorious way imaginable. One of the things this trailer does really well is show you that David's rise is not clean. It's not triumphant in the way you might imagine when you hear the word rise. Because the version of David we're meeting at the start of Season 3 is a man who is still running, still hunted, still living in the margins of a kingdom that is technically already his by divine promise. And the tension between what God has declared and what David's daily reality actually looks like is one of the most compelling and humanizing threads running through this entire trailer. You can see it in how David moves. There's a weight to him now that wasn't quite there in earlier seasons. Not a heaviness that comes from doubt, but the kind that comes from carrying responsibility for people who have chosen to follow you into danger. Because David isn't alone anymore. The trailer makes that very clear. Around him you can see the beginnings of something that will eventually become one of the most legendary groups in the entire biblical narrative. His mighty men. And watching them gathered around David, rough and battle-worn and completely committed, gives you this incredible sense of something being built in secret. Something that the world hasn't fully recognized yet, but that God has already established. But even with those loyal people around him, the trailer doesn't let you forget what David is still carrying emotionally. He lost people at Nob too. That massacre wasn't distant news to him. It was directly connected to his presence in that city, and the show has never shied away from making David feel the full human weight of the consequences that follow him. He didn't order what happened. He couldn't have prevented it. But the kind of man David is shown to be throughout this series is the kind who would still feel responsible, who would still lie awake at night replaying the moment and wondering if there was something he could have done differently. And that emotional honesty is what makes this version of David so compelling to watch. He's not a superhero moving through a story untouched. He's a man being shaped by every painful thing that happens around him and still choosing to remain faithful through all of it. The trailer also gives us a glimpse into David's spiritual life in a way that feels deeply personal. There are moments where you see him alone, not strategizing, not commanding, just quiet before God. And those moments are some of the most powerful in the entire trailer because they remind you of who David actually was at his core. Before the crown, before the battles, before all of it, David was a worshiper, a man after God's own heart, and the show has always honored that dimension of his character. But in this trailer, it feels more raw, more urgent. Like those moments of prayer and stillness are the thing keeping him together, while everything around him continues to fracture and threaten to swallow him whole. And then the trailer shifts to show you the political landscape David is now navigating. Because surviving isn't just about avoiding Saul's armies anymore. It's about alliances. About reading people and kingdoms and motivations correctly. About knowing who you can trust and who is only offering loyalty because they think you're useful to them right now. David is developing a kind of wisdom in this season that goes beyond military instinct. He's becoming a leader who understands human nature, who can look at a person and see not just what they're offering today, but what they'll do when things get hard. And that skill, that discernment, is going to matter enormously in the season ahead, because not everyone gathering around David in Season 3 is doing it for pure reasons. Some are drawn to power, some are desperate, some are damaged, and leading all of them well, keeping them together, keeping them pointed towards something larger than themselves. That is the quiet heroism this trailer is teasing, and honestly, I cannot wait to see it fully unfold. If the trailer is showing you David's world with a sense of something being quietly built and divinely guided, it's showing you Saul's world with something that feels genuinely terrifying. And I don't use that word lightly, because what the trailer is setting up for Saul in Season 3 isn't just a political decline. It's a complete spiritual and psychological unraveling. And the show is clearly not going to soften that or look away from it, and honestly good, because the full tragedy of Saul deserves to be told without filters. What's striking about how the trailer frames Saul is that he still looks powerful on the surface. He still wears the crown. He still commands armies. He still occupies the throne. But there's something behind his eyes that wasn't there in the earlier seasons, a kind of hollowness. Like a man who has been fighting so hard to hold on to something that he's forgotten why he wanted it in the first place. The throne was never supposed to be the point. The call was supposed to be the point. And Saul lost the thread of that calling so gradually, through one small compromise at a time, that by the time we reach Season 3, he is barely recognizable as the man God originally chose. And the trailer captures that transformation in a way that is genuinely haunting. His relationship with the people around him has reached a new level of dysfunction. The trailer shows his inner circle navigating around him rather than with him, speaking carefully, watching his moods, trying to anticipate his reactions rather than give him honest counsel. And that dynamic is one of the most dangerous things that can happen to any leader. Because when the people around you stop telling you the truth, you start living inside a version of reality that nobody else can see. Saul is deep inside that now. He's making decisions based on fear and distorted perception and a desperate need to control outcomes that are already out of his hands. And the people who once believed in him are watching the gap between who he was and who he's become grow wider by the day. What makes Saul's storyline in this trailer so emotionally complex is that he's not entirely unsympathetic. The show has always been careful about that. You can see traces of the man he was. Moments where something almost breaks through the paranoia and you catch a glimpse of the Saul who once stood tall and humble before God. And those moments are almost harder to watch than the dark ones because they remind you how far he's fallen and how unnecessary it all was. His tragedy isn't that he was a bad man from the beginning. His tragedy is that he was given something extraordinary and chose, over and over again, to protect his position over honoring his purpose. And now the consequences of all those choices are arriving all at once, and there is nowhere left to run from them. The trailer also hints very strongly at the military pressure closing in from the Philistines. And this is where Saul's decline becomes not just personal but catastrophically public. Because a king who is psychologically unstable and spiritually abandoned is a king who cannot lead armies effectively. And the Philistines clearly know this. King Achish of Gath is watching every crack in Saul's foundation with the patient, calculating eye of someone who has been waiting for exactly this moment. The trailer gives us glimpses of Philistine movement that feel coordinated and confident, the kind of military aggression that only happens when the enemy senses weakness at the top. And Saul, rather than responding with the focused clarity that a crisis demands, is responding with the kind of erratic decision-making that puts everyone around him in danger. The collision that the whole story has been building toward is almost here, and this trailer makes you feel every inch of that approaching disaster. One of the things that made Season 2 of House of David so layered and so rewarding to watch was how seriously it took the political dimension of this story. This isn't just a spiritual journey or a personal drama. It's a story about kingdoms, power, loyalty, betrayal, and the brutal human machinery that surrounds any transfer of authority. And the trailer for Season 3 makes it absolutely clear that the political chessboard is about to get significantly more complicated and significantly more dangerous. The thread that was introduced at the end of Season 2 involving Eshbal and his secret dealings with the false king of Edom is clearly going to pay off in a major way this season. Because what that storyline revealed was that even within Saul's own household, people were already positioning themselves for what comes after. Eshbal isn't waiting to see how things unfold. He's actively trying to shape the post-Saul world in a way that puts him at the center of it. And that ambition, operating in the shadows while Saul is still technically king, creates a fascinating and deeply unstable situation. Because Eshbal is operating without a foundation. He doesn't have God's blessing. He doesn't have the genuine loyalty of the people. What he has is cunning and desperation, and a willingness to make deals that more principled people would never touch. And as the trailer hints, those deals are about to have consequences that nobody fully anticipated. Then there's the question of Abner. Because Abner is one of the most fascinating figures in this entire story, and the show clearly knows it. He's a military man above everything else. Pragmatic, strategic, not driven by spiritual conviction in the way David is, but not entirely without a conscience either. What happened at Nob shook something in him that the trailer shows hasn't settled back into place. He's the kind of man who can justify a lot in the name of loyalty and military necessity, but there are lines even Abner won't cross willingly. And watching him navigate the space between his duty to the crown and his own growing revulsion at what the crown is becoming is going to be one of the richest character threads of the entire season. The trailer gives you just enough of Abner to make you desperate to see where his story goes and how far he's willing to let things deteriorate before he does something about it. The trailer also points toward David having to make some of the most difficult political decisions of his life so far. Because gathering followers is one thing, leading them with wisdom while being hunted, while resources are limited, while alliances are fragile, while the enemy is probing for weakness, that is something else entirely. David will be tested not just spiritually and physically in Season 3, but politically. He'll have to decide who to trust and how much. He'll have to decide how to handle people within his own camp who have agendas that don't fully align with his. He'll have to figure out how to maintain unity among a group of people who are together primarily because circumstances drove them there rather than because they all share the same vision. These are the kinds of leadership challenges that reveal true character more than any battlefield ever could. And the trailer is teasing that David is going to face all of them at once, under maximum pressure with no room for error.